Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. What do you get when you combine more than 10 years of talk radio experience with a conservative Christian historical constitutionalist who has an unbridled opinion, rapier wit, and a gift for the uncommon and little-known historical facts about America? That can only describe one person, and he's not only a friend of many years, host of MichaelHartShow.com, the author of Unknown America, Myths and Little-Known Oddities About the Greatest Nation on Earth, and the latest addition to our incredible roster of featured guests now appearing on the third Monday of every month at 10 a.m. I'm delighted to welcome Michael Hart to the Revealing the Truth family. Michael, welcome.
Great to see you, Rabbi.
Great to see you. Michael, we are in a amazing time where you have gone independent. You've now launched MichaelHartShow.com. People can see you on the web, both your live broadcast on Facebook Live. What other outlets do you have?
We are on Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, live every single day at 8 o'clock Central Time, as well as numerous podcast platforms.
So you're talking about not only the current situation, but you're also linking it back to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. You're linking it back to history, the history of America, and how what we're experiencing today relates to the historical experiences of America.
That is correct. The way we basically put it is breaking the news of the day through the prism of the past.
We're in what I would consider to be the single greatest hostage crisis that America has ever faced. Now, you're the historian, and the hostage crisis I'm talking about is Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party holding America hostage so that nothing is advancing, no agenda is advancing from the White House. And it's clear that they are going to be more anti-Trump than they are pro-America. And they say that they represent their constituency, that their constituency does not want a border wall, their constituency does not want a government shutdown, but their constituency is, they're talking about are the progressives, are the liberals, but none of the Democratic Party that represents what we would consider to be the more moderate, the more conservative Democrat, which erodes that number by what percentage would you think that would be?
Oh, it's quite substantial. You know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, I don't even think they have any good hard numbers as to what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish. And, you know, as far as the immigration numbers are concerned, either, you know, the idea of, you know, 800,000 people being held hostage, you know, is actually probably an infinitesimally small number because we haven't factored in the contractors that are also affected by this as well. So the narrative that gets out to the American public is one that is crafted by them for the purposes of driving the idea of open borders. And the reality of it is it's actually much worse than is being portrayed.
You know, the scary part to it, and I had a guest on last week from Canada, and Prime Minister Trudeau has announced that Canada is taking in 1 million more refugees from countries who we would not accept refugees. Now, what's interesting about Canada is that if you are living in a country that has ever been under the crown, then you have a right to land as a landed immigrant in Canada and be given temporary immigration status, which can leave you there permanently until you apply for permanent status or you leave. And so we have a northern border that nobody's talking about, and that's where the Pakistanis are coming in. That's where immigration and jihad through immigration and migration is our most vulnerable point, yet our eyes are on the southern border. And I find it to be incredibly distracting that the national affairs, national security of America seems to be focused on a singular point, our southern border, and we're paying absolutely no attention to the northern border, which is easily accessible to cross. And we know that Pakistani refugees, Pakistani militants are coming through that particular border into America, and we're not watching whatsoever. I think it's a great distraction of the enemy. But has there ever been another point in history, and the reason why we have you here is because you're the historian. You're the one that looks back through the 200 and how many years now?
40-ish.
240-ish years of our history, and saying, okay, we face the same crisis at this point under so-and-so's administration. Have we seen a blockade of this proportion by the Democratic Party in prior years, and how did we navigate our way out of it, and what happened?
Well, you know what's interesting is that there have been several caravans, if you want to call them that have approached the southern border. Another thing that's kind of befuddling to me is, every president gets a variety of nicknames or monikers assigned to them, whatever they might be. And one of the ones that Barack Obama had was the deporter-in-chief, because he deported so many illegals during his administration. Now, the borders were still quite fluid at that point in time, but they were going through a period where they were deporting quite a few people that were here illegally, that were criminals, whatever the case may be. We have visited this, and quite frankly, immigration in this country has been in a mess almost from day one, but it's been very bad in the last 30 or 40 decades as things around the world have heightened in terms of the threat factor to various populations. But now the message, the willingness, in particular the liberal Democrats, to allow people to come here has fostered an environment of America being your ultimate destination point. You point to the northern border. It's also a problem in our airports as well. And that's primarily an Asian invasion, if you will. And so has it happened historically? It absolutely has. But what's really fascinating about it is if you go all the way back to the very early 1800s, Alexander Hamilton warned that this would in fact occur if we ever lessened the responsibility of people coming into the United States and the reasons that they were coming here. So yes, immigration has been a problem literally since 1802, 1803.
Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, I consider to be enemies of the state. They do not have America's best interest at heart. They have been vocal that it doesn't matter what President Trump proposes. He just this weekend proposed new legislation that had a great many compromises in it, but there was a piece in there for the funding of the wall, and they said we will not act upon anything that has anything to do with the wall. This is shutting down America. And he's taken the position, as he should, that unless America moves on this immigration problem, even to the point of saying, all right, you don't like what I'm proposing. You don't like what my team has come up with. You come up with some tangible piece of legislation that accommodates what your agenda is and include funding for the wall, and I will sign that legislation. And they have, gone on a junket to Hawaii?
Right.
Or Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico, yeah.
And then they were planning on a junket to I forget what countries were involved.
Egypt was one, Brussels was another.
Who's paying for that? And here's a government shutdown where the average American that works for the government is not getting a paycheck, and you have these leaders who are not meeting, they're not staying in Washington, they're not acting upon it, and they're sending a message that says they don't really care, but it just continues to work people up into a lather and a frenzy, and nothing is happening.
Well, at the end of the day, it is all a matter of compromise. And, Saturday, 3 o'clock local time, the president did come out. I don't know that I'll go so far as to say that he capitulated, but, he used in exchange, somewhat of a moratorium as it relates to the DACA recipients. There was $805 million, as you're well aware, for humanitarian aid, which ironically enough, the Democrats say we have a humanitarian crisis on our southern border, but all of a sudden, they're not receptive to that. And then there's the cybersecurity aspect of it, and keeping the borders protected by use of drones, and only 230 some odd miles of fencing to be built. And it's so exasperating because everything the Democrats say that they want. And personally, you know, we have audio from Barbara Boxer, Dianne Feinstein, Pelosi herself, Barack Obama, all saying almost verbatim the exact same thing the president has said up to this particular point. It's obvious that it's it's a hostage situation, as you point out, but the reality of it is, no matter what he says, they are going to automatically take the opposite posture, and their words that they're using their own words against him. And so it's one of these situations where they don't understand the severity of the problem, or, and I quite frankly think this is it, they are more concerned about their tit for tat and the schoolyard antics as it relates to Trump.
When we look through history, how did we move the progressive? There's been a progressive agenda in America since the introduction of socialism, communism, the 1950s. We saw a big move. We're looking at the people that are announcing their candidacy for 2020. They're all on this bandwagon for moving America to become a socialist nation. How does that fly in looking at Venezuela, looking at the former Soviet Union, looking at countries who have never prospered under socialism? Why is this becoming such an important agenda that this become a socialist nation?
Well, it has to do with management of citizens and populations. That's what it all boils down to. We saw the very first introduction of it really going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, when even in her college thesis, Justice Alana Kagan referred to the fact that the progressive movement was disintegrating because the communists were too concerned about it. The reality of it is a matter of giving to people. You look at the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world and their unrealistic expectations. But at the end of the day, if you sell the idea that you vote for me, you're going to get free stuff, you're going to get your cell phones paid for, you're going to get your mortgage taken care of, etc., and there's going to be free groceries for everybody, etc., that sounds really good. But most people don't understand that the underlying aspect of it all has to be funded, and it has to be funded from a free market society, which just simply cannot coexist in a socialist or communist government. But the average person on the street who is more concerned about The Voice or who's dancing on the stars this evening or whatever the program's called don't understand the long-term ramifications of it, and the Democrats are quite frankly very good at keeping the long-term ramifications cloaked.
In your opinion, in this 2020 election, do you think that they have a chance of defeating Donald Trump?
Yes.
And if that happens, what's the future state of America?
That's really hard to discern. What's really interesting is this past week, for example, Maxine Waters, of all people, ended up in the chairman of the House Committee, Finance Committee, and brought on Alexandria Cortez. Within the Democrat Party, it's beginning to factionalize to where you have the Pelosi-ites of the world, but then you have the Democrat socialists represented by the Ocasio-Cortezes and people such as Maxine Waters that see them as the future of the party. And so looking forward, it's very hard to discern exactly what is going to transpire in 2020. And I also happen to believe, in part, that the funding for the wall and Pelosi's position on it is her way of solidifying her power base when it comes to 2020, because she realizes that the party is, in fact, splitting.
Do you see a move towards the moderate Democrat leaning towards a Republican candidate because of their fear that they know that socialism is a failing government construct, a failing social construct, and a failing economic construct, and it's brought about the demise of Venezuela, it brought about the demise of the Soviet Union. There's never been a successful socialist country. Why, with Bernie Sanders, who was the first person to actually mention socialism and have it become a part of the political narrative, he was really the one that kind of came out and said that this is the agenda. when you look at the lineup of who's announcing their candidacy, you're seeing that there's a consistent theme, and I think we're going to see 20 or 30 people come out as candidates for the Democratic nomination. They're all going to be singing from the same hymnal. Where's the one person that's going to say, wait a second, there's a space in the middle for balance and for realistic solutions, and maybe that person was Donald Trump. Maybe that person is Donald Trump, if he can ever get people to listen to what he's actually trying to pass and trying to legislate.
Well, you have several things at play here. Number one, there's a real socialist movement amongst the millennials. And a study that came out just about a week or so ago, there was about, I think it was 61% of millennials polled are in favor of socialism. But similarly, only 29% of that exact same group of people can define socialism. So they don't really know exactly what it is that they want. To your question of whether or not you have we'll call them, center left or even center Democrats that might come to the Republican side. That is certainly a possibility. And we do see a little bit of, the walk away movement growing. But at the same time, something's going on in this country that has never really gone on before. And that is the mobilization of younger people, the younger voters, the misinformed voters, that they are going to support. For example, Kamala Harris came out today and announced her candidacy for 2020. You still have Elizabeth Warren in the mix. Some of the older Democrats, the more established Democrats, are moving towards the Ocasio-Cortez view of the world, and they're getting more and more and more momentum behind me of brand new, fresh voters that I fear is going to outnumber those that might move into the center.
So if, in fact, in 2020, we get a Democratic president, we get someone who has an agenda that's going to be supported by a Democratic House, that's going to impact those who are up for senatorial elections, because it's every 2 years. They're going to be there's the half is it half every 2 years?
Right.
So you have half coming up for re-election. If by chance we had a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and Democratic Senate, what do you foresee the future of America?
That's a lot of ifs. And one of the things that I've always been very quick to point out is that the legislative branch is just one branch of government. Now we have to factor in some other things here. Do the Republicans hold on to the House or the Senate? Does it flip over to the Democrats? Are they successful, for example, in the elimination of the Electoral College, which they are desirous of? Then you have the census counting, which one judge has now ruled it's unconstitutional to ask about citizenship. So if you have illegals, for example, California, and the possibility of holding on to 9 electoral votes that they're not really entitled to, there's a lot of factors that play into this as to what it looks like in the future. But if, in fact, it were to go to the extreme that you're referring to, we are seeing, for all intent and purposes, free market economics challenged and possibly put on the back burner. Maxine Waters has already said publicly that she will attack, her words, Wall Street. And so you're going to see, you talk about the impeachment of Donald Trump, now they're talking about, for all intent and purposes, the impeachment of the free market economy that serves the nation. So you could have an economic implosion on the economic level, but again, as you point out, that would happen after they already took control.
Our forefathers warned us about this very thing.
They did.
They wrote it in the Federalist Papers. They wrote it in the Constitution.
Correct.
They wrote it and said that there is the potential for us to go into a tyrannical model, which was no different than what we were revolting against. So is there the possibility of a civil war within the construct of America? Maybe not of taking up of arms, but of some form of civil unrest that is of such a proportion that we're looking at a national crisis. We're looking at coming under a police state kind of environment to squash the rebellion, because you and I are capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
We're been capitalists. We're going to continue to be capitalists. We know that a free market society is what's going to keep medical costs down, what's going to keep car prices down, what keeps gasoline down. All these things are kept down by competition. But when you have a government that becomes so inflated, and socialism will inflate the government. If we're talking about 800,000 now, we're talking about 2.4 million under a socialist government to administer all the programs that they would want to advance and have the government control. It is government out of balance, and it is no longer government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's a government where we're going to have state channels like they have in foreign countries, which is just constantly C-SPAN becomes now a vehicle for the advancement of the socialist agenda. We're looking at a crisis in America, and I don't hear the voice, the outcry, the outrage, the protest. The Democrats have always been better at mobilizing voices and people. Where is the conservative voice in America today and the very loud outcry other than on Fox News?
I don't know that a lot of conservatives understand the severity of the problem. A couple of things to bear in mind here is that when Karl Marx penned the Communist Manifesto, as you know, he was funded by a German financier by the name of Friedrich Engels. And I bring that up only because Karl Marx had this great notion of socialism, communism, but didn't even really believe much of what he espoused himself. In that sense, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, and the list goes on and on and on. They're not socialists. They are capitalists. They want their constituents to be socialist. They're still going to have their millions, their mansions, their fences, their walls, their speedboats, and they're going to live over here. It goes back to John Kerry. You probably remember some years ago while he's screaming about socialist ideologies, how the yacht that he owned got taxed because it was refueling in the wrong port. The point is that they espouse an ideology that they themselves do not adhere to. They just want other people to adhere to it. In that sense, they work behind the scenes very frequently with a lot of their conservative counterparts to keep it just that way, because it is all about money, power, and influence for them. It's the voters that we have to get the word to. I don't think, obviously, they don't understand the severity of it, and too many conservatives, for the life of me, I don't understand why so many conservatives are as timid as they are. And a lot of the times, you'll get those occasional outbursts from the Lindsey Grahams and the Gaudis of the world, but then it doesn't seem to really stick. I kind of liken it to going to, whether or not you go to the synagogue or you go to your church, you hear this great, compelling, life-altering message, and then you leave it there. And I think that's one of the biggest sins of witness, is the fact that there's all these things going on, and we have conservatives in this country that they consume news, but then they don't marshal the energy and the motivation to go out and preach the gospel that they have just learned. In addition to that, you have a lot of young people that are remarkably receptive to this new age, new millennial kind of mindset where everything is complementary. So on one side, you vote for me, you get everything you want. On the other side, because conservatism's hard. Having faith is difficult. You've got to work at it. You're going to be challenged. And a lot of these young people, they've been risen in the world. They don't have to be challenged. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to deal with the challenges. And that's an easy message to sell to people.
We're talking with Michael Hart, host of the MichaelHartShow.com. You can find him all over the internet at MichaelHartShow.com. He's a featured guest here, appears on the third Monday of every month at 10 a.m. as we talk the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth right here on our program, Revealing the Truth. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the potential for Ruth Bader Ginsburg stepping down, another vote for a conservative, truly a tipping point for the judicial branch and the Supreme Court, and what impact that might have in stymieing any legislation that's going to be challenged that moves us to a socialistic environment that may be brought before the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court is heavily loaded towards a conservative base. Can they actually legislate these type of agendas that are being proposed today? We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on the 3rd Monday of every month, at 10 o'clock a.m., we feature Michael Hart, host of MichaelHartShow.com. You can find him online here, there, or everywhere as he brings you a conservative, crisp, rapier wit, gift for the uncommon, and little-known historical facts about America. You can get his book, Unknown America, Myths and Little-Known Oddities About the Greatest Nation on Earth, on Amazon. Get the Kindle version, get the paperback version, and read about historical little-known facts that actually happen to apply to today. And you'll be surprised at how many oddities and historical facts are really coming back to the surface that you and I knew nothing about. Michael, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is recovering from cancer. We pray blessings on her and healing for her. She's been a wonderful jurist. Excuse me, whether we like her or we don't like her, she's been faithful to the call that's been given to her to serve as a Supreme Court justice. But if this court goes 6-3 conservative, which it's most likely that unless Donald Trump is somehow removed from office, that in the next 2 years there's going to come a vote to replace another, at least one other Supreme Court justice, with a new Attorney General in place that is part of the Justice Department, part of that branch of government, the Attorney General. What's going to happen? Is this Mueller investigation going to come out? Is this going to bring about anything that it's been 2 years, okay? Nothing definitive has come out against the president, and there's a lot of innuendo, but no fact. What do we see happening if he takes over in this role and replaces Jeff Sessions? Do you see him moving this forward and saying, this is now under my jurisdiction, and I'm now going to instruct them to get this thing moving along, put an end to it? Because how many hundreds of millions of dollars have they invested in this? Oh,
there's no telling. I mean, I don't even think they know.
So all that money could have gone to the wall.
Sure.
Okay, but here we are wasting American taxpayer dollars. And by the way, everybody on the Mueller investigation is still getting paid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, none of them are under this government shutdown, so they don't really care. They're just looking to dig up dirt on the president. We've seen the FBI become the single most corrupt organization in a long time, even dating back to J. Edgar Hoover himself.
Glad you brought that up.
It parallels the Hoover reign, and we're now seeing the same kind of antics as we saw then. Do you think that Bill Barr is going to bring change, bring an investigation to Hillary Clinton, bring about a closure to this Mueller investigation, and get America back on track where we can focus on what the United States government needs to be focused on?
I think a lot of that, there are so many moving parts in that question. Part of it also goes back to whether or not Ginsburg, and I think she's going to step down soon, whether or not she steps down soon, gets a confirmation or a nomination from the Trump administration. The reason I bring her up into the FBI thing and the J. Edgar Hoover thing, a lot of people don't realize that J. Edgar Hoover, he kept files on John Lennon and Jack Kennedy. He knew who Kennedy was running with in terms of females. But the biggest relationship, the biggest dust-up was actually because Joe Kennedy and J. Edgar got along, but it was Bobby Kennedy that was the real thorn. And what's so interesting about that is that when all of this came out years ago, the Department of Justice set forth new rules, creating somewhat of a wall of separation, kind of like the church and state thing, between the FBI and the White House. And so the relationship changed. But it wasn't supposed to be as cozy as it sometimes was. So there was supposed to be this opportunity for the FBI to come in and do the investigations the way they wanted to do. Now, with that said, going back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she steps down. Trump then has a brand new nominee that he wants to put in. A lot of people don't realize this, but during Bill Clinton's impeachment and the Ken Starr investigation, one of the chief investigators for the Starr team was Brett Kavanaugh. And the Clintons were very vocal when Kavanaugh was nominated that they were going to make that as difficult as they possibly could for that confirmation. So you've got the weaponized FBI over here working. They don't think the Clintons have gone anywhere. You've got the weaponized FBI over here making up their brand new rules at the behest, in part, of the Clintons, who are looking to get back in the Trump administration by virtue of the fact that he nominated, Brett Kavanaugh, who, of course, was one of the investigators of Bill. And so you've got all these moving parts, but, it depends on how much political capital that Barr feels like the president has, and or how much Trump is willing to expend on the removal of Mueller. Because if Mueller's not removed or the investigation wrapped up, we've got him for the duration. Because he is not investigating anything. They already know what they know. The fact that Donald Trump, who had business relationships in Russia long before he ever went out and said that he was going to run for presidency, why that is all of a sudden a measure of suspicion is beyond me. But one of the things that I do have a problem with, and I've shared this with you, and it's unpopular for some people, I don't like the fact that the president tweets as much as he does, but I also don't like the fact that he dispatches people like Rudy Giuliani onto CNN to say that he never said that Trump was himself personally involved with the Russians. So I think the Trump administration needs to back up, be quiet, let Barr do what he has to do by privately nudging Miller along to wrap the investigation up, because if he does not, the FBI stays weaponized in response to what goes on with the confirmation of whoever Trump points to replace Ginsburg.
You know, there's so many series of shadows looming over this entire Trump administration. The number of tweets, I agree with you. It is a PR nightmare. I came out of marketing and public relations, and, you know, zip it is really the word of the day. Let government do its job. Yes, you are the chief executive of the country, but the chief executives of corporations don't tweet out every day instructions to the hundreds of thousands of employees that they have. Your opinion matters, but that's what the war room's for. That's what the Oval Office is for. That's where you voice those opinions. You have a press corps. You have a group of people that are going to frame the message, and it's too raw, too personal, and too much of an attack, and it has eroded him as a personality, where the country is split. I want to defend him. I want to defend his policies. He has some 2,000 accomplishments that he's made the first 2 years, economic, global, that are beyond what most presidents have ever accomplished. But none of that comes into the headlines because of all this other junk, and he adds fuel to the trash heap every single day. It makes it difficult for the legislators to do their job because they're getting flack on one side and commentary on the other. But if we have a 6-3 Supreme Court, do you think that will increase, especially if we have in 2020 a Democratic flip? Do you think that the Supreme Court is going to be as impactful as we all hope it will be in making it so that some of this legislation is found to be unconstitutional?
Let's go historical and hysterical.
Okay.
Because a lot of people don't realize that, you know, now you've got the possibility, the House of Representatives is in the hands of the Democrats. You might have a Democrat win the White House, and obviously the Senate could very well flip. If you go back in history, and this was actually discussed about 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago, and that is adding justices to the Supreme Court. Back in the day when FDR was president, he introduced what was called then the court packing plan, where he wanted to add 6 additional justices that would rotate in and out in different terms. In other words, they wouldn't be appointed for life, but they would rotate out, bringing the total justice count to 15. Well, the Democrat Party at that point in time said, you know, no, we're not doing this. That's ridiculous. We're not going to give you that kind of power. However, jump forward 80 years or so, and the playing field has changed. If you have the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes, the Maxine Waters, and the Pelosi's of the world really take root, and then the possibility of a Kamala Harris, for example, or an Elizabeth Warren that might occupy the White House, although I think they're dark horses and long shots, the reality of it is that whether or not you have a 6-3 majority or not might not matter if in this very electric political climate they were to reintroduce, which they've already discussed, the possibility of packing the courts out.
So they changed the game plan,
Sure.
and all of a sudden they neuter the conservative. If it was done during a Democratic administration, then that would change the numbers to 9-6. Depending on who, 9 liberal, 6 conservative, depending on who was in the rotation. As a matter of fact, you could actually have 9, under that scenario, 9 liberal justices seated at one particular time under that scenario, which would just be mind-boggling.
Well, it's also very important for people to realize, again, and this is the reason my show is formatted the way that it is, and that is breaking down the news of the day through the prism of the past. People say, well, that is outlandish. It could never come to pass. It almost did. And you mentioned in the previous segment how history is cyclical. Things come around. You know, George Santayana, those that cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. I don't think people realize that a lot of the things that are going on in this country today have been attempted in the past. Now you've got a much more favorable climate and environment for that. Then you continue all the way back to the wall, allowing people to come in. Let's throw the census in there, and then throw in the Electoral College and the possible repeal of that. And the Democrats or the progressives or the socialists, because at that point in time, you're no longer a Democrat, you're full-blown progressive. At that point in time, they own the direction of this country for the foreseeable future, and that might be 50 to 100 years.
So what does that do to the economy? What does that do to the stock market? What does that do to free enterprise? What does that do to health care? What does that do to Social Security?
Let's get really into the weeds here for just a moment. You know, many people don't realize that the United States, one of the reasons that we're able to borrow as much money as we do and fund these socialist programs and whatnot is the fact that the dollar acts as the world's reserve currency the majority of the time. In other words, other countries trade in U.S. dollars between themselves. There is a cost to those countries for doing that because the dollar is so stable. If in fact we were to go full socialist, then we jeopardize, because some countries are already moving away from the dollar, the Russians, for example, using the Chinese yuan. If we were to move away and see a diminishing of the dollar as the world's reserve currency, not only do we run the risk of imploding the U.S. economy, we run the risk of imploding world economies, because at the end of the day, Rabbi, the United States is the world's bank. I understand there's a world bank, so to speak, but everything cycles or funnels through New York City and Wall Street at the end of the day. So there's a very big possibility here of not only bringing the U.S. economy to its knees, but by default the world economies, and that sets the perfect stage for the anarchy you referred to earlier. And almost, you're the biblical scholar here, but from my perspective, it almost seems like the fulfillment of prophecy as the world literally begins to unravel under the weight of its own despair.
And when you talk about prophecy, here's what I see. I see Israel about to be put into Babylonian captivity. I see God's message to Israel says, you like your idols? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pack you up and move you out of your country to a country steeped in idols. I'm going to give you so many idols that you're going to be so sick of it, and I'm going to keep you there for 70 years until you realize that idol worship is the undoing of mankind. And then I'm going to bring you back. You're going to rebuild the walls, you're going to rebuild the temple, and you get back in line. I see that as the potential for America that says, all right, you want to embrace this kind of environment. The president of Venezuela gets his second-term election, and all of a sudden there's an upheaval. Mm-hmm. There's a new 29-year-old guy or a 32-year-old guy that they want to put in place and replace him. The United States has endorsed this new candidate to come in to reverse socialism in Venezuela and to right it. How can you have a country that's looking at Venezuela and what's happening to the people of Venezuela, the poverty, the disease, the sickness, all the problems that go along with Venezuela? We're seeing a living example of what will happen in America if we go to a socialist system. And we're seeing it right before our very eyes, and we're not supporting it. We're actually taking a stand against it. How can we then advance the socialistic agenda in America? And where are the voices? I would expect the Lindsey Grahams, the Trey Gowdies, there's a whole list of them, to be getting on the Senate floor and screaming at the top of their lungs and getting coverage from every media source for soundbite after soundbite saying, you people, it's 2 years from now, you're heading in a direction of destruction of everything that our founding fathers put in place. Where is it? Where's it? Lindsey Graham is, I'm for this, I'm against this, I'm halfway in, I'm halfway out. You know, is he considering a run against Donald Trump for president? Is he positioning himself and posturing himself saying, okay, maybe I've accepted the fact that Donald Trump is going to be impeached, and possibly removed from office. And therefore, there's going to be an opening, and there's an open slot. Mike Pence, is he going to be a viable presidential candidate? I don't think so. I don't think the country has embraced Mike Pence in a way that he's been anything more than a mouthpiece for Donald Trump, which is his job. That is the job description of the vice president. But I also see him on the House floor, and I see him as the president pro tem of the House of Representatives, and he's up against a Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi is stronger spirit, stronger mouth, stronger following than Mike Pence, and I don't see it really become, I'm concerned, deeply concerned about the media, which is owned by the liberals. I see George Soros with an unlimited amount of money that would love to see America go this way. You know, where is Warren Buffett, who has billions upon tens of billions, the wealthiest man, I guess, or one of the wealthiest men in the country, well over $150 billion. Jeff Bezos is about to get cut in half because of his divorce. But where is Warren Buffett, who knows that the financial collapse of America would take place and impact him personally to the tune of billions of dollars of his net worth? Where's he in backing people and being vocal in making sure that America doesn't take this turn?
You know, I have bemoaned the conservative response to this for years. I don't understand why we are, again, so feckless when it comes to these things. I don't know if it's a matter of capitulating to the progressive ideology, or if it's just a lack of understanding and knowing. Because, you know, here in America, economically speaking, we have fractional reserve lending and fractional reserve banking and so many other ways to raise revenue, back to the fact that we are the world's reserve currency and whatnot. I don't know that you have a lot of people in D.C. that really truly grasp this. There has been a long time status quo of we've always rebounded, we've always been able to come out of these. I don't know, and I've said this before, and it's kind of weird to say it this way, but I've often said I wouldn't want to be a parent raising young children in the world today, because parents are raising kids in a world they themselves do not understand. And I'm speaking about technology. I think there's an aspect of that that plays into our current state of politics, where things are moving so far to the right, so far towards the Democrat socialist ideology, that the Grahams of the world, the Buffetts of the world, they can't grasp what other people on the left are believing. Nancy Pelosi, I honestly believe, I know she's well funded and she's a speaker, but they're kind of the hanger-oners of what is coming down the pike. It's scary, and I make fun of her all the time, and I do it in such a satirical way, but the Alexandria Cortezes of the world, they are the future of that party if something is not stopped. And now we're talking about the education system in this country. So at the end of the day, where are the voices? I don't know. One's sitting right here. But I don't know if people are really grasping the severity. And you want to talk about the threat of global warming and that clock running, although I don't believe in it, this clock is running much quicker. Look how fast. You know, I realized you had people that were impoverished under the despotic government of Hugo Chavez, but look how quickly that nation fell apart. And then what's really interesting is the Democrats are over here screaming that Donald Trump is a closet fascist, yet they want to nationalize health care. They want to nationalize so many other entities within this country, which by definition is fascism. Hello? I mean, for the life of me, I can't grasp. Maybe the Republicans don't get it. Maybe they don't think it's as bad as we think it is. Maybe they don't know how to address it. Maybe they're afraid to address it. I don't have an answer for that, but I share your concern.
My deeper concern is that if this takes place, it will set up an alliance across Europe, across Asia, across Africa, for the creation of what we biblically would call the one world order, or the one world government. If we buy into this liberal agenda and we take America and we make ourselves a friend of all nations, which is part of this, the other side of this agenda, is that we're no longer globalists, we're no longer America only, we're no longer populists, we're now globalists. We're now going to align ourselves with all the other nations of the world. And is this setting the stage for the rise of a one world government? And will we acquiesce to China? Will we acquiesce and say, okay, if we want relations with North Korea, Let's do it the Chinese way because they're the voice, they're the vocal, they can handle that. Let's do it the Russian way because they seem to have control over Turkey, over Jordan, over Lebanon, over Syria. They're deeply entrenched in Ethiopia, in Libya. They're deeply entrenched in many of the Muslim nations because of oil and gas reserve. Do we then change our alliances from a State Department perspective when you have this liberal, sure, let's just get along. It's the Rodney King gospel. Can't everybody just get along? That's what the agenda is coming down the pike. And that's what concerns me from a biblical perspective is, are we setting the stage for this one world government where we're looking at an EU on steroids, where all of a sudden the United Nations, which hates Israel, we've had the only impact that we've had is that we continue to veto everything out of the Security Council that we possibly can to keep them from giving Palestinians statehood and Gaza nationhood and all of these things. But how long is that going to last? We seem to be pushing this boulder up the hill, and we're getting to the point where we don't have enough people supporting the pushing of the boulder. Therefore, the boulder is going to run over us, wipe us out, take us back to the bottom, which I think socialism, this liberal agenda, and this idea, the one world peace, one world global, this global warming initiative becoming the most important factor. You know, it's as if there is no God, that God's not sovereign, God doesn't control the sun, He doesn't control the moon, He's not bringing about whatever changes there are in the earth. And all of this is setting the stage for a different economy, a different currency, a different standard, and a different America than the America that I've known for seven decades since Truman was in office in my lifetime. I've seen this country change, and it's not going in the right direction.
No, it's not. And what's really interesting about it is you've got socialism that is fueling so much of this and the push. And what's funny is that when it hits critical mass, as you point out, the boulder, it comes back and it begins to crush, which is also is going to encourage socialism as people become more and more desperate. And then you look at Europe, for example, Great Britain specifically, and the quivering that's going on over there with Theresa May and all the debate about Brexit and the future of the EU. So the world is more or less in a position right now of trying to reconfigure itself, which would be a new world order in its infancy. But the problem is that, as you are well aware, once a child is born, they grow rather quickly.
Yes.
So, this could get out of control in the next 10, 12, 15 years, where you could see what we perceive to be a new world order simultaneously. Look at all the things going on, whether it's Brexit or the moving of the, in Jerusalem and things that Donald Trump has done. We're living in very historic times, and truth be told, I'm not 100% certain it can be stopped. But it certainly needs to be spoken to, because 10 years from now, we're not going to be addressing the country that we currently recognize, because at the end of the day, I hate to be such a fatalist, but I'm not certain, because of the not just economic climate, but the intellectual climate and the philosophical climate in this country. I'm not certain that we're not beyond that tipping point. I think we're there.
Well, I think we're there as well, and it's all biblical. It's biblically foretold that this is going to happen, and we're watching it unfold before our eyes. Is it a biblical proportion? It is. Is it everything as it should be? It actually is from a biblical perspective, but you and I just don't like it. And that's sometimes the position we have. When God speaks, we don't always like what He has to say. We've been talking with Michael Hart of The Michael Hart Show. You can get him you can follow him on michaelhartshow.com. Look up the name Michael Hart, H-A-R-T, Heart of America. You can find him and his book, Unknown America, Myths and Little Known Oddities About the Greatest Nation on Earth. He appears here as a regular guest on the third Monday of every month at 10 o'clock, and you can find him here. You can find him there every day at michaelhartshow.com. Listen to him, a voice that needs to be heard. Michael, thank you for another stunning edition of
Thank you, Rabbi.
Revealing the Truth. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of revealing the truth.